Emily, my wife of a decade, greeted me as I walked through the door after work on Wednesday night. She asked me to sit down at the table because, as she put it, we needed to have a serious talk. My gut told me this was the start of one of those tough conversations no one wants to have. I sat down, trying to brace myself. She started by saying she was certain I knew she loved me and would never do anything to hurt our marriage. Her words immediately put me on edge. I managed to get out an "okay," but before I could say more, she took a deep breath and interrupted me. I could sense the conversation was about to take a dark turn. "I love you, and I want us to grow old together, but I've made a decision. I want to have an affair," she said, almost casually. That I was completely blindsided by her revelation. My mind scrambled to make sense of it, and I couldn't hide my frustration. "So let me get this straight. You love me, don't want to harm our relationship, but you want to be intimate with someone else?" I asked, my tone a bit sharper than I intended. She shook her head slightly, as if I was missing the point. "I wouldn't put it exactly like that. I've met someone I'm interested in, and I want to have a physical relationship with him. It would only be occasional, and I promise to be honest with you about it. I believe I love you enough for this not to change how I feel about you. If you truly love me, you should let me do this, because I feel like I need to," she said, a confident smile playing on her lips. That I was baffled, trying to understand how she could even think this way. "I don't get why you think you need to do this, and I can't see how it wouldn't affect us." "Have you and this person already made plans?" I asked, still in shock. Emily nodded, hesitantly. "We're tentatively planning to go away for a weekend next week." Then, she dropped another bomb. She asked how I would react if I was the one proposing something like this to her. It was a loaded question, and I knew any honest answer could set her off, considering the absurdity of the situation. I replied, trying to stay calm, "I'd be okay with it, as long as you assured me it wouldn't affect our relationship." She shot back, "You know damn well you would have flipped out if I ever suggested such a thing." I scoffed at her comment, unable to believe what I was hearing. She seemed genuinely surprised and added, "I honestly didn't expect you to react this way. I thought your love for me would let me do something this important." I retorted, "Well, whatever you're smoking must be illegal. Did you seriously think I'd just give you the green light to be with this guy? Am I supposed to sit at home twiddling my thumbs while you go on a weekend rendezvous?" She paused, her confidence wavering. "Maybe I didn't think things through too well," she admitted. "You're right, I didn't consider a lot of things, including my own feelings." I pressed her, "If I say no to this, will you still go ahead with it?" She looked uncertain. "I honestly don't know. I never thought you'd refuse me. We both didn't think this through very well. Here's what we'll do, give me a few days to think this over. Let's sit down Sunday afternoon and talk about it after I've had some time to reflect." That night had left me shaken. Feeling uneasy, I went to our bedroom and started moving my things into the guest room. She followed me, asking what I was doing. That I explained, "I'd rather not share a bed with you right now. It seems like your mind is more on someone else than on me." After entering the guest room, I slammed the door behind me with a force that matched my anger. The night offered little rest, but it did give me time to hatch a plan. It became painfully clear that if she went through with her intentions, our relationship would be beyond repair. The next morning, I left for work as usual, not saying a single word to Emily. Once at work, I called in and informed them that I needed the next 2 days off for personal reasons. With that taken care of, I set my plan into motion. First, I bought 3 voice-activated recorders. I placed one by the phone, another in our bedroom, and the third in her car. I even got my hands on a phone tap recorder, which I connected to our landlines. My next stop was the cell phone provider. Since the account was in my name, I had no trouble getting a detailed copy of her phone charges. Later, while she was still at work, I decided to dig into her email accounts. I stumbled upon an account I hadn't known about, but cracking the password was a breeze. What I found there was revealing, to say the least. Thankfully, I learned she hadn't been physically involved with him yet. I set up the account to forward any emails to me without leaving a trace. To cap off my day, I picked up a couple of discreet GPS locators. These little gadgets were easy to hide. My plan was to slip one into her wallet since she always carried her cash and cards there, and the other would be stashed in her car. It had been a chaotic day, but I'd set everything up to monitor her every move. The only thing left was getting access to her cell phone to check for any messages, which I hoped to do later that evening when I'd also plant the GPS devices. While sifting through her emails, I discovered she had been exchanging quite a few messages with a coworker named Henry Miller. So, this was the guy behind all of this. I was more than ready to turn his life upside down, just as he had done to mine. The emails confirmed that the upcoming weekend was still on, no matter what I had to say about it. That Friday, I made an appointment with a top-notch divorce lawyer. I instructed him to initiate the divorce proceedings, citing adultery as the reason, with Henry Miller named as the other man. The lawyer assured me that the case would be straightforward with the right evidence. I handed over all the emails and phone records and mentioned that I'd soon have audio recordings to add to the pile. He seemed pleased with the case and got to work right away. When Emily came home that evening, I gave her the cold shoulder, not saying a word as she made dinner. Instead, I left the house, heading to a bar to grab a meal and down a few beers. When I returned, she tried to start a conversation, but I just walked right past her, went into the guest room, and slammed the door shut. The only way she could save our marriage was by canceling her plans with Henry, but I didn't hold out much hope for that. I continued to give her the silent treatment throughout the weekend, until Sunday afternoon when I decided it was time to talk. We both sat down in the kitchen, and I began by letting her know just how unenthusiastic I was about her ridiculous request. I told her that I had given the matter serious thought, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a single way to be okay with it. I pointed out that, despite her assurances that it wouldn't impact our marriage, the damage was already visible. I mentioned how she seemed upset and suggested that if she had considered things from my perspective, she might have shown more understanding. I tried to see things from her point of view, but no matter how I looked at it, there was nothing positive in this situation. So, I told her flat out that I couldn't agree to her request. "How can you be so selfish if you love me?" she snapped. "If anyone's being selfish here, it's you, wanting to run off with someone else." "What if I go ahead with it anyway?" I responded calmly. "There will be serious consequences for any affair." "We both took vows 10 years ago to stay faithful," she shot back. "I know, but this is something I have to do." I sighed and replied, "Well, then I guess this conversation is over." "You really need to think this through." I left the house, taking my laptop with me to a Wi-Fi spot so I could keep an eye on their emails. She was furious and reassured him that she was going through with it no matter what. He responded enthusiastically, telling her he had already booked room 125 at the Hilton in Kansas City for Friday and Saturday nights. Without hesitation, I reserved that room for Thursday night. They were making this too easy. They had plans for a romantic date on Saturday evening, dinner, dancing, and, of course, intimacy. Emily even mentioned that she had bought new underwear specifically for their date. As I grabbed a bite to eat, I continued monitoring their correspondence. They had moved beyond my refusal and were deeply engrossed in planning their weekend together. Check-in time at the hotel was 3 p.m., so he was going to pick her up at 1 p.m., considering it was a 2-hour drive and they wanted to get there as early as possible. I was taken aback when I realized he planned to pick her up from our house. I needed to decide how to handle that. I also reserved a room for myself for the weekend, close enough to theirs so I could intercept all their signals. Over the next few days, I gathered all the equipment I would need, including a couple of small fiber optic HD video cameras. My plan was to install them in the room on Thursday so that I'd be fully prepared to document their weekend activities. This evidence would be the perfect addition to my divorce case. During this time, I continued to give her the silent treatment, but I knew Wednesday would be her day of reckoning. I decided to give her one last chance. If she chose Henry, it would be the end for us. I asked her to sit down at the table for a moment. She didn't look pleased but complied. I started the conversation by asking if she had given it any more thought. She nodded and confirmed her intention to go ahead with her plan. She mentioned her upcoming trip with Henry and expressed a hope that we could move past this. I let out a deep sigh and warned her, telling her this was her final opportunity to reconsider. I urged her not to throw away our marriage for someone else and cautioned her about the consequences she would face if she went through with it. Despite my warning, she remained resolute. I concluded by telling her that she had chosen Henry over me, making it clear that her decision marked the end of our marriage. I left the room, slamming the door behind me with the usual force. It was clear that our marriage had reached its end, and someone was going to pay the price for it. On Thursday morning, I went to work and requested the afternoon and the following day off to finalize my divorce plans with Emily. My boss was understanding and supportive, giving me the time I needed to take care of things. That afternoon, I drove to Kansas City, checked into the room they had reserved, and set up all the surveillance devices, ensuring everything was working as it should. I was determined to gather all the evidence necessary for the divorce proceedings, and I made sure to be thorough. Using my laptop, I double-checked that all the cameras were properly positioned and functioning correctly. After confirming everything was in order, I walked down the hall past their room to ensure the range was sufficient for monitoring. It was perfect. Returning home, I couldn't help but reflect on the finality of my marriage. I had one last errand to run before everything fell into place. I stopped by a gun store and purchased a small can of pepper spray, intending to use it to disrupt their romantic date. When I got home, Emily was waiting in the kitchen, looking at me expectantly. I walked right past her without a word and slammed my door once more. She followed me into the room, trying to act friendly, but I cut her off, telling her to save it for Henry because I didn't need her pity. I turned my back on her, and she eventually left. I didn't sleep well that night, but I knew everything was set to bring this ordeal to an end. Friday morning, I got up and left at the usual time without saying a word to her. I went straight to the lawyer's office and signed the divorce papers. I informed them that I'd have all the necessary evidence by Monday and requested that she be served with the papers at her workplace on Monday afternoon. I also made arrangements to have Henry served at the same time, as I intended to sue him for alienation of affection. Checking Emily's GPS, I saw that she was at the hair salon. I returned home, went into her suitcase, and found the new underwear she had bought. They were undeniably seductive, though it was a pity she wasn't doing this for me. Wearing rubber gloves, I pulled out her new lingerie and sprayed the crotch of her panties and the cups of her bra with pepper spray before carefully placing them back in the suitcase. This was going to be interesting. With that task done, I headed to the bank and closed all our joint accounts, transferring the funds to a new account solely in my name. I also canceled all the credit cards that had both our names on them. It was a satisfying morning's work, and I headed home to say my final goodbye to my wife. Around 12:30, I knew she would be getting ready for her new man. When I entered the house, Emily was nowhere to be seen, so I assumed she was upstairs preparing. I walked up to her room and found her in some lingerie I had given her in the past. She tried to cover herself, but I told her not to be silly since I had seen it all before. She looked stunning. Her new hairstyle was perfect, her makeup flawless, and the lingerie was certainly enticing. I couldn't resist telling her that she looked amazing that day. I expressed my disappointment that she hadn't put in such effort for me, to which she responded by saying she just wanted to feel good about herself that day. Continuing, I told her that while she looked alluring, it felt like she cared more about impressing someone else than she had ever cared about me. She apologized, claiming that she simply wanted to feel attractive. I let out a heavy sigh, reminding her that she had always been attractive to me. I emphasized how deeply I loved her and believed she had once loved me as well. Then, I approached her and gently removed the rings from her left hand. I explained that the wedding ring I had given her held significant meaning for me, symbolizing our vows to forsake all others. I expressed my disappointment that it seemed to mean less to her now. I also told her I didn't want to see the ring I had given her on her finger while she was with another man. Moreover, I mentioned that the engagement ring was my mother's, and I intended to keep it for sentimental reasons. As I slipped both rings into my pocket, she looked surprised but didn't argue. I won't be here when he arrives, I said, but I don't want him coming into my house. You can't be with him here. If you do, I'll take serious action against him and make sure you won't be desirable to any man again. I promise you that. He cannot set foot in my house. Do you get it? Yes, I won't let him in, she replied, clearly uneasy. That's good, I responded. I'll be keeping an eye on things, she then asked. Why are you acting like this? I replied, because the love of my life just shattered that love. I hope this weekend is worth the consequences. Goodbye, Emily. With that, I turned and walked away from my soon-to-be ex-wife. She yelled something at me as I left, but I was done with her. I parked down the street, making sure Emily could see me. If he dared to enter the house, I was ready to risk jail, but they'd suffer more. Soon enough, his car pulled up. He walked to the door and rang the bell. Emily came out with her suitcase, setting it down before embracing him, followed by a long, passionate kiss. As he picked up her suitcase, she glanced my way, wearing a smug grin. She sat right beside him in the car, giving me another smug look as they drove past. I responded by flipping her off, wiping that smug look right off her face. Upon returning home, I immediately changed all the locks and the garage door code. I had already packed my suitcase, so I grabbed it and headed to Kansas City. After checking into my room, I set up my laptop to monitor the cameras. The one aimed at the foot of the bed showed Emily making a move, indicating they'd already been intimate. It was pretty clear that he hadn't lasted very long because when he emerged from the bathroom, he was completely naked. I couldn't help but laugh, noticing that he had a very small tool. Emily was used to much more than what this guy could offer. About that time, Henry joined Emily on the bed, clearly ready for another round. She smiled at him and opened her arms, but I couldn't help but laugh again when she reached for his tiny tool. He didn't have to hold back. I'd be surprised if she could even feel that tiny thing inside her. Wow, she really made a terrible choice. This guy was absolutely pitiful. I could see the frustration building on her face as he took another break, and it was becoming clear she wasn't going to be thrilled with how this weekend was turning out. She'd return home unsatisfied, only to face getting kicked out the very next day. He was soon ready for another round, but it was just another underwhelming 4-minute performance. 3 times already, and she still wasn't close to satisfaction. This was unfolding better than I could have ever hoped. Eventually, I had to stop watching. I couldn't take it seriously anymore. I decided to head out for dinner and a couple of drinks, leaving everything recording to capture all the evidence I'd need for the lawyer. This way, Emily would see exactly how poor a choice she had made. When I returned to the room, Henry was fast asleep, and Emily looked even more frustrated than before. Honestly, this was turning out to be quite enjoyable. Once I got past the initial pain of losing my wife, it became almost entertaining. I went to bed thinking about the fun I'd have messing with Henry tomorrow. Thoughts of the attractive women I'd seen at the bar danced in my head, and I knew I'd soon be free to pursue them. I drifted off to sleep with a contented smile on my face. No more anguish for me. My path was set, and I knew exactly where I was headed. That I woke up feeling refreshed, ready for some mischief. After a shower, I went out for a nice breakfast and picked up some snacks in case I couldn't get away later. Back in my room, I decided to add a little more salt to the wound. I called a local florist and ordered a bouquet for Emily, just like the ones I used to give her on our anniversaries. Since there wouldn't be another anniversary, I wanted her to reflect on what she was throwing away. I requested the delivery for 11 a.m. The timing was just right. That it turned out to be perfect. They had left the room for a while, and upon returning, they resumed their romantic activities. They were just getting started when there was a knock at the door. The florist had arrived with the flowers, and I watched as Emily's expression shifted from contemplation to outright anger. She grabbed her cell phone and dialed a number. My phone rang, and I answered it, keeping the conversation brief. Hello, how are you? Not great. My wife's out with some other guy while I'm here, getting angrier by the minute. Why do you even care? Well, I received a bouquet of flowers, just like the ones you always get me for our anniversary. I was curious about what you were up to. I don't know how you could think I sent those. First of all, you and your genius boyfriend kept me in the dark about where you were going. Secondly, if I had sent you flowers, they would have been ragweed, and the card would have read, "To my cheating wife." Not very nice, right? But then again, neither is your little escapade with Henry. Maybe those flowers will help you realize what you're throwing away. I noticed the shocked look on her face as I hung up the phone. She tried calling again, but naturally, I didn't answer. She kept trying a few more times before finally giving up. I watched as she told Henry what I had said, and he, in turn, tried to reassure her that I would eventually get over it. However, getting over it wasn't going to happen until I was completely rid of her. She wasn't in the mood for any closeness at first, but after a while, she began to soften up. That's when I decided to have a little more fun at her expense. I ordered a pizza, her favorite, and made sure it was delivered to their room. The pizza arrived just as Henry was getting back into action. He was visibly irritated and didn't want to pay, but the delivery guy wasn't having it. He confirmed the room number and Henry's phone number, even threatening to call the police if he didn't settle up. Reluctantly, Henry paid for the pizza. Since they had it, they figured they might as well eat. After finishing their meal, they chatted for a bit, but Henry's hormones took over once again. Just as things were heating up between them, I placed another order, this time from a sandwich shop. I picked Emily's favorite sandwich, and it arrived just a minute into their next intimate session. When Emily saw the sandwich, she started to piece things together. She realized I must have figured out their location. Henry was in disbelief, but she spilled the beans about my sarcastic remark, guessing that I'd probably hacked into her new email account where he had mentioned the details. It took her a while, but she eventually figured it out, even admitting that I was pretty clever and wouldn't have had much trouble pulling that off. They decided to get dressed and go out for a while, planning to return, freshen up, and then head out for their romantic date later. Emily assured Henry that she'd make it up to him tonight. As they left, I couldn't stop laughing. Tears were rolling down my face. When they got back, they showered and got dressed. Emily put on some lingerie, giving Henry a little show. He tried to make a move, but she insisted they go out for their date first. I wondered how long it would take for my little surprise to kick in. She finished getting dressed and looked great, but I knew what was coming. Off they went, and I settled in, eagerly awaiting their return. About an hour later, they were back, and Emily dashed into the bathroom, hopping into the shower. She stayed in there for quite a while, and when she finally emerged, her breasts and crotch were bright red. They looked painful, and it was clear that little Henry wasn't getting any action tonight either. Emily lay on the bed, groaning in discomfort. When Henry tried to get frisky, she snapped at him, explaining that she was in pain and not interested. She chalked it up to some sort of allergic reaction to her new lingerie. Little did she know. Meanwhile, I spent the evening organizing all my videos and making DVDs for my lawyer and Henry's wife. Once everything was ready, I called it a night. It had been a highly successful day, and I couldn't help but smile. Trouble was brewing in paradise, and I was the one stirring the pot. Sunday morning, I got up and headed back home. Emily was in for a world of trouble when she returned, but tomorrow it would all be over. When Henry dropped her off later that day, he didn't even bother walking her to the door, just let her out like she was an afterthought that I was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a football game, and didn't even acknowledge her arrival. She announced that she was home, and I barely reacted. She walked right in front of the TV, flashing me a sultry smile and commenting that she thought I might be happy to see her since she was, after all, still alive. I shot back, questioning what had led her to believe I had suddenly turned into a fool. She explained that she didn't think I was foolish, but rather she believed my love for her was strong enough to overcome the situation. That I replied that while I had indeed loved her deeply, that love had withered the moment she left with someone else. Despite my pleas and heartfelt confessions, it seemed my feelings meant nothing to her. I admitted I had stopped caring whether she returned once she had left with him. Her reaction was one of shock, unable to believe I felt this way about her. I affirmed it was indeed the case and stressed that she had made a grave mistake. She then asked if there was any chance for us to move forward, promising she'd do anything to make things right. I responded with a sarcastic suggestion. Maybe she could drop to her knees and beg for forgiveness. She protested, saying she couldn't do that. I sighed, acknowledging that I knew she wouldn't, which only deepened my doubts about the sincerity of her promises. Much like her vow of fidelity when we married, she said she had been thinking about me all day and wanted to make love that night. I coldly replied, "You need me?" "I don't think so. Making love tonight is highly unlikely." "Did you have little Henry use protection every time you were with him?" She said no, claiming you was married and she couldn't have children. I continued, "Do you think you're the only one he's been raw with? As far as I'm concerned, you're damaged goods now. I won't touch you until you get a clean bill of health from a doctor. Plus, I don't do seconds. I know he's clean, but if you don't trust it, you can use protection." She snapped back, "Right, I'm going to use a rubber to sleep with my husband after spending the weekend with some loser who didn't use protection? Screw you. You chose little Henry over me. I can't stand looking at your cheating ass tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I prefer the master bedroom." "Unlike you, I didn't do anything wrong," I replied firmly. "We can talk about this tomorrow when you get back from work." I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. I left the house and headed to a nearby bar and grill to grab some dinner and clear my head. My mind was already clear. I just needed some distance from her. I'm not much of a drinker, so I opted for a meal and took a long walk. When I returned home, she was in my bed. I gave her a stern look and told her to get out. She argued that this was our bed and she had just as much right to be there as I did. I retorted, "The hell you do. You gave up that right when you got involved with little Henry. So either get out of my bed, or I'll haul your stuff out and toss you onto the street." She began to cry and slowly left the room, her sobs faint but unmistakable as she walked down the hallway. The next morning, I barely acknowledged her presence. We each had breakfast in silence, and she left at her usual time. As she was heading out, she told me she loved me. I shot her a cold, disdainful look and replied that I had once loved her too, past tense. Her eyes filled with tears as she turned and walked away, clearly stung by my words. Once she was gone, I got to work. I packed her belongings into garbage bags with methodical precision. Then, I called up Henry's wife, Emily. I asked if she was aware that her husband had spent the weekend with mine. She was under the impression that he was on a business trip, so when I offered to show her the evidence I had gathered, she was eager to see it. I was taken aback by her beauty when she opened the door, stunning, to the point where I stammered an apology for my initial surprise, which was completely genuine that we sat down to discuss what had happened over the weekend. Emily's fury was palpable. We decided she would come with me to the lawyer's office to see if he would take on her case. The lawyer agreed to represent her and even offered a discount. While Emily filled out the necessary paperwork, I spoke with the attorney about the best way to protect her. He assured me that if she signed the papers beforehand, there would be no issues. After lunch, while they prepared her divorce papers, I dropped Emily off at home and then headed back to wait for her call. I was supposed to call her later to update her on the situation, but my phone rang around 3 o'clock with her voice on the line, clearly distressed. "What's going on?" she demanded. "I just got served with divorce papers, and Henry's got some papers about being sued," I replied. "Seems pretty clear to me. I warned you about the consequences of your actions." "Looks like you didn't believe me." Her voice was incredulous. "I didn't think you'd actually do this," I shot back. "Maybe you should have taken my warning seriously instead of getting tangled up in whatever Henry was telling you." "We can talk when you get back to my place." I hung up and proceeded to toss her belongings into the front yard. I was recording the whole ordeal, knowing it would be useful if I needed to get a restraining order. When she arrived and saw her things scattered outside, she exploded in a rage. She screamed incoherently, her fury evident as she ranted and raved. I remained calm, letting her vent before initiating our final discussion. If you want to have a conversation, you need to calm down first, I said firmly. Otherwise, I'll pack your stuff in your car and you can leave. Through her tears, she wailed. I never thought you would do this to me, I responded with unyielding resolve. Do this to you? You did this to us. I told you over and over not to destroy our marriage, and you ignored me, but you chose to do just that, I said, my voice steady but tinged with hurt. Why would you think I wouldn't file for divorce? She whimpered. You said you loved me. I did, I admitted, more than anything. But you shattered my heart. The problem is that you clearly didn't love or respect me. I can't live with someone who holds me in such low regard, even though I still have feelings for you, she asked. Why do you keep calling him Little Henry? I leaned in, my voice sharp. I had cameras set up in your room. I recorded everything that happened over the weekend. When I first saw his underwhelming package, it was so laughable that I couldn't help but laugh until I cried. I even wondered if you could actually feel anything with that. She tried to defend herself. We really made love. I'll probably miss that. I offered a different perspective. Look at it this way. Now you're free to be with anyone you want. You can have a new partner every night. She shook her head and said, I don't want that. I want you. Only you, I suggested. Let's go inside and sit down for a few minutes. I'm sorry for my harsh words. I'm just dealing with a lot of anger right now. But understand this, would never physically harm anyone. The same can't be said for Little Henry. We went inside and sat down at the kitchen table, a place that had been a backdrop to countless conversations over the years. It hit me hard to realize that this would be the last time we'd sit together like this. She asked hesitantly. You wouldn't actually hurt Henry, would you? I responded firmly. Why not? He's the one who destroyed our once happy marriage. I think he should face consequences beyond just a lawsuit and his divorce. She expressed doubt. You really believe that? Or is this just a trick to make me look bad so you can be with him? I told her. I spoke to his wife this morning and shared my evidence. He told her he was away on a business trip. Now they're sharing a lawyer, and we even got a discount. She reflected. I wish you had been honest when I asked how you'd react if I wanted to be with another man. You know you would have gone crazy, I argued back. He knew his wife would never agree to that. I don't think you believe me even now, and that's one of the reasons we're getting a divorce. But honestly, I don't care what you believe. When you call him later, you'll find out that he's also been shown the door, she asked. So you're really kicking me out? I confirmed, yes, I am. The night you revealed your plan, I went into the guest room to think. Within an hour, I knew I wanted a divorce. On Thursday, I bought the equipment I needed to gather evidence and hacked into your email account. Then on Friday, I visited the lawyer and began the divorce process. She pleaded, why didn't you give me a heads up about your plans to divorce me? I might have reconsidered. Is there any chance you could forgive me? I looked at Emily, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Emily, I loved you deeply. Forgiveness might have been possible, but last night was your final chance, and you let it slip away. I could potentially forgive you, but I could never trust you again. I'd live every day wondering when you'd choose someone else, and I can't live like that. It's better if we end this now. Her tears flowed freely. I've put a lot of thought into this, I continued, and each time, I come to the same conclusion. I'm divorcing you, and I'm going to make sure Little Henry pays for destroying our marriage. I gave her a stern look. You can call him before you leave if you want to arrange a place to stay or whatever. Just don't try to use your credit cards. I've canceled them all. I've left half of the money in our checking account for you, but I've removed my name from it. I'll split our savings with you, and you can keep your card, but you'll need to handle the payments. Take all your clothes and personal items once you find a place. You can have as much furniture as you need, but the house is mine. If I decide to sell it, I'll split the proceeds with you. It's all laid out in the divorce papers. If you choose to contest them, I'll use all the evidence I have, and it won't end well for you. I don't want to go down that road, but I will if necessary, Emily replied. I won't fight it. This is all my fault. I just wish I could undo it. I tried to lighten the mood. Do you know the difference between a cheating wife and a light bulb? Confused, she asked. No, what's the difference? You can't have a romantic relationship with a light bulb, I said. She didn't find the humor in it. I told her it was time for her to leave and escorted her out of the house. As she tearfully watched, I loaded her belongings into her car. After everything was packed, I handed her one last item, her wedding ring. I had flattened it with a hammer and told her it was now just scrap gold that she could sell for a decent price. After closing her car door, I leaned in and kissed her on the forehead, whispering my final words, "Goodbye, my love." I turned and walked back into my empty house, my eyes brimming with tears. I didn't watch her drive away. I couldn't. I cried for another hour until I was emotionally drained. Now, I had to consider my options. First, I could drown my sorrows in alcohol, but I hardly drank and disliked the aftermath of heavy drinking. Second, I could end my life, supposedly to make everyone happy, but I refused to give her that satisfaction. Third, I could stand tall, knowing I had done nothing wrong, and move forward with my life. The silver lining was the absence of Emily, which brought a faint smile to my face that I straightened up, still smiling, and dialed Emily's number. We made plans for dinner that evening. I realized I was on the path to healing. As I stood upright, smiling, I called Emily again. We arranged to meet for dinner, and I felt a sense of recovery. Perhaps we'd end up as friends, or maybe I'd find someone new. For now, the image of Emily lingered in my mind, but I knew I was moving forward.